First, I see on this topic of education a couple of individuals that I've got tremendous respect for, who can provide so much more in this area. I see Peggy Lewis LeCompte and Radina Medley, who have been tremendous educators in the East St. Louis School District 189 and beyond system. And when we think about education, Stephanie, I'm so glad that we've been invited to be a part of this morning's procedures, because when you think about where we stand as a community and as a people, I always say there are three things that you cannot get away from when you're talking about a community or a society moving forward. The first of which is education. The next two are infrastructure and public safety. Today we're going to focus on this education piece, and Tiffany Lee has just laid it out. I'm going to borrow some of the comments that she made because it all ties together. When you're talking about an unjust legal system, let's go all the way back for just a second and make sure that we remind ourselves that it was criminal for Black people to even have a book in their hands. It was criminal. It was actually vilified if you were trying to actually learn something beyond what you were being told to do by the slave master in an agricultural-driven society. It was criminal to talk about anything that was providing you learning of any sort. Can you think about that? And we're less than 200 years removed from that time frame. Let's bring it a little bit closer to home. I think about my hometown of East St. Louis, Illinois, a place that I still call home and work for in this 2025 environment. East St. Louis was founded in 1861. Do you realize there was not a school for Blacks to attend until 1886? So for 25 years, there was the thought, we don't even need to provide an educational opportunity for you. To take it a step further, East St. Louis Senior High School was in existence for those first 90 years before a Black person in 1950 was even allowed to attend East St. Louis Senior High School. The Blacks attended East St. Louis Lincoln. We were not allowed to attend the flagship school called East St. Louis Senior High School. Take it a step further. We've all seen the pictures of, here's the fountain that the little Black boys could choose to drink from. Here's the one that the white boys could choose to participate in. Here are the ball fields that people were allowed to play on. Here are the gyms that Black versus white were allowed to participate with. When you're talking about education, one of the most important things that you're talking about is exposure. What do you even get to see? If you see inferior products, what do you think your learning is going to be? And for centuries, the best of education was denied from African Americans. So we know we've got an issue, and we're still catching up, bringing it fast forward to today. We have one of the greatest institutions known to mankind, Harvard University in Boston, Massachusetts, that is having to file a lawsuit against the United States government, and in particular our current president, because he's trying to restrict federal funding because they happen to be hiring individuals based upon all kinds of factors, including diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a bad thing according to this administration. Individuals who are qualified, but being told we can't put in the equation the fact that you're African American or Asian American or anything else. We've got to run you away, and we've got to run away the system that is trying to prevent this, what I would call an injustice that has been going on for years. We've got to make sure that we understand what it is. I heard the gentleman talking about housing. Let's go to another factor, which is called the digital divide. If you have individuals who can't get a Wi-Fi signal to work on the Chromebooks at home to really be an effective student in 2025, how's that student going to compete versus the one who has the fiber optic network and the digital accessibility that he or she needs? We've got to resolve that issue. We've got to deal with that. We've got to first of all understand it. And I've got to give a quick commercial for a second. Again, I didn't teach as long as Miss Metley and Miss LeCompte, but I was in the East St. Louis School District classroom as a teacher for a couple of years. And what I also recognize, ladies and gentlemen, is that we need to make sure that we put right back in our students' faces, education is still the key to your success. You need to understand that you need to learn all that you can and grab it up and do something with it. But beyond that, we, as those who set the policies for our communities, need to make sure that we have relevant education being taught in our school systems. We know that we need to be teaching people how to work on computers, how to build things. I love the fact that I see out here at SWIC a new construction-oriented facility that is right here teaching people the trades, the plumbing, the carpentry, the electricity, the computer engineering, how to do networking. Those are the kinds of things that we have to insist on. We, as a black people, are still very much playing catch up. We are behind, and we cannot let our young people fall behind because they want to look at everything that's going on YouTube. Some of that is meant to distract. That is something that throws them off the course of really building themselves to be ready for this 21st century, 2025 and beyond kind of economy. Education will be the key to how well we can compete in the economy. What is another factor? When you see people trying to censure certain forms of education, one of the most ridiculous things that I saw the other day is that there is an attempt to dismantle the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., one of the Smithsonians that teaches all kinds of understanding of where we have been as a people and the impact, the positive impact that black folks have made on this wonderful country. But you're talking about dismantling it because it actually calls out the positives of a people called African Americans. So we have to ask ourselves, and I don't mean to stray into the topic of politics, but you can't talk about anything without talking about it. We have to remind ourselves and educate ourselves to understand that the power is in the ballot. There's another election in 2026. There's another election in 2028. We need to be preparing ourselves to put people in place who actually are going to put forth the kind of understanding and learning and education that all people need, Black people and non-Blacks. I love all people. Everybody needs to understand the contributions of Black people in this country. Don't dismantle the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. Don't try to remove books out of certain universities and schools in the state of Florida. Don't try to take away what is true history. We need to learn it all. Just like we need to learn the math and the science and the English and the foreign languages and the construction trades. Do not restrict those things away from African Americans. The last thing I'll talk about is let's make sure that our facilities are what they need to be every step of the way. You don't build a new school without a construction-oriented facility. Let's face it, there's a rebuilding of America that's going to have to be done. Every school should be teaching and really hammering down the point of construction-oriented education. The plumbing. How do you deal with putting in wiring in a school and in a facility like this? How do you embrace the arts that African Americans have been such a huge part of generating in this country and in this greater metropolitan East St. Louis area? How do we make sure that people still appreciate music, acting? Who knows? We might be able to develop a Hollywood of the Midwest right here if we will use our understanding of how they did the same thing in Atlanta, Georgia. 30 years ago, nobody thought about a Hollywood in the South, but that's what you have in Atlanta. So let's not let our young people, our seasoned people, our middle-aged people be restricted because certain things are not exposed to us. Let's make sure, Stephanie, that we stand on quality education for African Americans and for the world as a whole. We're not trying to keep it all for African Americans, but we're also not trying to keep it from African Americans. Let's support our teachers. Let's support our principals and the others who have to educate our students. Let's insist that our universities are places for free learning. And what I mean by free is free of mind. I know we have to pay something for our students to be educated, but let's make sure that they're not restricted away from actually being able to pick up a book, to pick up a video, to understand there's a YouTube channel that focuses on this, and we're not being told you can't see certain media outlets because they're saying something that may be counter to what I want you to know. One of the greatest things we have in America is freedom of speech and freedom of hearing what needs to be heard and seen. A big part of education goes beyond what is normally just in a book. Education is about exposure and indoctrination. We've got to be careful. Let's stay woke. Stay woke.